Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. What if humanity's defiance was not just about survival, but a hidden strength ready to shock an entire empire? Let's get into the story. Grand Emperor Skrillex. His exoskeleton decorated in the Empire's colors, adorned with medals gleamed marking his conquests he had overseen whilst Emperor. Under the harsh lights of the Krellian throne room he glimmered, almost statue-like. He surveyed his court with a mixture of satisfaction and disdain. Before him, thousands of Krellian dignitaries pulsed with fervor, their voices rising in a chittering chorus of agreement.
The humans!
Skrillex's voice echoed, acidic even, without amplifying technology.
These primitive upstarts, barely crawling out of their mud pits, dare defy our dominion? They reject our benevolence, mock our authority.
Around him, rage rippled through the crowd. Humanity's refusal to bow had been a festering thorn in the Empire's pride. Earthlings, with their infuriating defiance and unexpected technological leaps, were the sole stain upon the Krellian Star Empire's record of uncontested expansion.
Now is the time to extinguish the flame of insubordination. Today is the day we remind the galaxy we are the rulers. Their primitive defenses will be swatted aside, and we will turn Earth into a fireball.
A roar emerged from the crowd. Their empire built on obedience, domination, and subjugation. Mankind had its flames stoked, and now it was time to extinguish it. He gestured expansively towards the vast view screen dominating the throne room. There, orbiting the Krellian homeworld, a sight to instill fear into any foe. The Grand Armada of Retribution. Sleek battleships, cruisers bristling with weaponry, destroyers swarming like vengeful insects around their monstrous capital ship. This wasn't a mere expeditionary force. This was annihilation.
Our patience is exhausted!
Skrillex screeched, his voice finally cracking.
The humans shall learn that defying the Krellian Star Empire is a path to extinction!
Long live the Empire. Long live the Emperor. The crowd erupted, and with a triumphant flick of his segmented tail, he turned and strode from the throne room. The gathered masses erupted in a deafening wave of approval, united in their anticipation of the crushing victory to come. Aboard the flagship of the Grand Armada, Fleet Admiral Kires studied the tactical displays with a dispassionate eye. The human system was mere hours away. Initial intelligence had painted the Sol system as pitifully defended, just as the Emperor had proclaimed. Even if the humans possessed some hidden might, it would be laughably insignificant compared to the destructive power of the Krellian fleet.
Admiral,
A subordinate chittered, interrupting his contemplations.
sensor readings from the Sol system are unusual. Unusual?
Kires snapped.
Explain. Our long-range scans are detecting energy signatures inconsistent with human technology, sir. Numerous objects of considerable size, yet unregistered. It's as though they were deliberately masked.
The subordinate hesitated, his voice wavering.
Perhaps some primitive stealth technology?
Kires bristled. These humans were getting tiresome. First their open defiance, and now these petty tricks. His warriors would enjoy crushing even the illusion of resistance. Still, caution was always warranted.
Signal scout wings to conduct additional scans,
he ordered.
I want maximum detail on these anomalies before we proceed.
As the scouts departed, Kiress couldn't shake the sliver of unease worming into his mind. The Emperor's proclamations echoed. These humans were not as harmless as they seemed. Yet even in his wildest imaginings, Kiress couldn't conceive of a force capable of challenging Krellian supremacy. Now, the anomalies were likely a desperate last stand, pathetic and futile. He settled back into his command chair, already envisioning the swift destruction of the human world. The Emperor would be pleased, and Kiress, perhaps, would gain a coveted place in the annals of Krellian military history. This victory was assured, a mere formality before the inevitable outcome. The worst-case scenario, he would lose a dreadnought or two. Scout Wing Beta swept into the outer edges of the Sol system, their sensors primed to pierce whatever flimsy tricks the humans had concocted. Each vessel pulsed with a predatory hum, their crews anticipating the easy slaughter of primitive warships.
Wing Leader,
A voice buzzed over the comlink.
picking up anomalous energy spikes, massive signatures, not matching any known human tech profiles. Elaborate.
The wing leader hissed, a thrill of excitement rippling down his segmented body. Perhaps this wouldn't be a complete waste of time after all.
Wait.
Hold on. The voice took on a perplexed, panicked tone.
Visual contact. Targets decloaking. By the Emperor's molt, what are those?
The feed to the wing leader's command console flickered alive, and his mouth froze agape. The sight that greeted him wasn't one of a few hidden battleships. No, it was a monstrous armada materialized from thin air, gleaming behemoths armed with unimaginably powerful weaponry, swarming fighters forming geometric clouds that blotted out the very stars, and all bathed in a cold light that seemed to leech even the bravado from the Krellian warrior's soul.
Retreat!
He managed to screech into the comm unit.
All retreat! Signal them!
His transmission cut off in a blinding flash. Not one of Beta Wing returned to the Grand Armada. On board the Krellian flagship, an alarm shattered the complacent silence like a shriek in a tomb. Panic rippled through the command deck as reports flooded in, confirming their worst nightmare. Kiress jolted forward, his eyes widening in disbelief as the chaotic data scrolled across his display. Beta Wing, communications offline, unknown status.
How?
He choked out, his earlier confidence replaced by cold dread.
Scout Beta Wing, come in. This is Kiress. Answer me, you damn fools!
Sensing something was going on,
Get me something on Beta Wing, now!
he demanded, barking orders. Something was happening, and he was flying into the unknown. He scrambled to his station, barking orders that his staff struggled to keep up with.
Tactical projections, now! Scan data, analyze anything! I need eyes and ears on the situation!
Dropping out of hyperspace, they were greeted by Beta Wing, or what remained of Beta Wing at least. The command deck stood still for a moment before resuming their duties, trying to figure out what was going on. But even as the frantic activity buzzed around him, a horrifying clarity blossomed in Kiress's mind. The humans hadn't been hiding weakness. They'd been masking a strength beyond anything the Krellian Star Empire could imagine. This wasn't a final stand. It was an ambush, carefully orchestrated, and the Krellian Grand Armada had waltzed straight into it. High Admiral Jensen stared out as the Krellian fleet stumbled into the trap, clearly shocked and trying to piece together what was going on. The trap was closing, and Jensen had his hands on the Corellians' vitals, ready to watch life flicker out from the Armada's eyes. He almost felt a pang of pity. Almost. It had been so gratifying to see the Emperor's smug self-assurance disintegrate with a few keystrokes. Now, it was time to finish what Earth had started and drive the point home with overwhelming force. "All wings, engage," he commanded, his voice a steady bass rumble compared to the increasingly panicked squawking on Krellian comms channels.
Formation Omega. Remember your training. Show them the price of their arrogance.
For a second time they uncloaked. The view from the Krellian fleet now filled up with the human fleet. What was once the vast expanse of space now turned into a vast human armada. The human armada surged forward, a wave of cold efficiency crashing against the Krellian lines. Years of drills, battles fought only in simulations had honed them into a precision weapon. Their capital ships unleashed a storm of fire. Not the wild barrage of a desperate defense, but targeted, calculated strikes intended to cripple and divide. Krellian shields flared in response, some holding, some buckling under laser fire that seemed to burn hotter, brighter than anything they'd faced before. Human fighters swarmed through the chaos, their pilots not reckless but chillingly efficient. The Krellians, used to easily overwhelming inferior foes, were now the ones caught off guard. Every evasive maneuver was met by a human counter. Their once lethal return fire now glanced harmlessly off surprisingly resilient hulls. Panic bloomed like a virus within the once proud fleet. This wasn't the swift subjugation of insects they had expected. They were the ones being dissected, torn apart by a force they tragically underestimated. "Sir," his tactical officer shouted over the din, "enemy flagships are attempting to break formation. They're looking to scatter and warp out. We got them on the ropes." Jensen grinned, a flash of predator teeth and a weathered face. "Don't let them. Delta Fleet, execute intercept plan Sigma, cripple their warp drives. Force them to stand and fight. Gamma and Epsilon, concentrate fire on that command ship. Kires's pride and joy, wasn't it? Force the bastard to watch his fleet disintegrate, a lesson he won't soon forget." The Krellian flagships, realizing retreat was impossible, thrashed in desperation, their attempts to rally the rest of their fleet falling on terrified ears. The human warships were relentless, exploiting their tactical advantage ruthlessly. Shield generators wailed, entire sections of Krellian ships were vaporized by energy weapons, and the once mighty armada was being picked apart piece by piece. Aboard the crumbling Krellian flagship, Fleet Admiral Kires stared in wide-eyed disbelief at the devastation around him. The humans weren't just technologically advanced, they were terrifying in their cold efficiency. They weren't scrappy underdogs, they were meticulously crafted killing machines. The folly of their emperor, of the entire Krellian Star Empire, it reverberated through the screams of his dying crew. The bridge, once a pristine monument to their power, was a scene of abject horror. Consoles sparked and died, spraying terrified Krellian officers with electrical discharges. The scent of scorched metal and ozonized air battled with the coppery tang of blood. You could hear the roar of hull breaches, the vacuum of space greedily sucking the life out of the behemoth that had so recently epitomized Krellian might.
"Warp drives are offline!"
The engineer chief screeched.
"Multiple hull breaches on decks 3 through 6! We're losing containment! We're losing everything!"
Around Kires, the bridge crew, the proud officers who'd once brimmed with cold superiority, devolved into pathetic, whimpering creatures. This wasn't their usual battlefield, where they could casually extinguish the flickers of resistance from lesser species. This was annihilation, an absolute reversal of power played out with chilling precision. Kires's grand ambition of a decorated military career, of securing a legacy as a conqueror of worlds, shattered like the viewport now showering him with shards of vacuum-resistant glass. A human missile tore through the flagship's flank, gutting the command deck entirely. His world went black as his body slammed against a bulkhead, the pain eclipsed only by the soul-crushing weight of absolute defeat. Groaning, coming to amidst twisted metal and the charred corpses of his once trusted subordinates, he saw a hologram being transmitted through the carnage, an armored, imposing form. High Admiral Jensen, no doubt savoring the moment of victory, examining his prey he had caught, who Kires had underestimated, dismissing cloaking anomalies as nothing more than a primitive party trick. Perhaps the human admiral would offer a hand, some warrior's gesture of grudging respect. A naive hope. Jensen simply raised his arm. For a moment, Kires thought it might be a soldier's salute. Then Jensen made a simple, brutal motion, a thumb slashing down. The death sentence, final and absolute. Kires closed his eyes, the roar of explosions swallowed by the fading chittering of his dying crew, the final, shameful eulogy to Krellian hubris echoing in the void. Across the ravaged battlefield, silence finally began to descend, replacing the roar of lasers and the crackling of dying warships. The Emperor's once impregnable Grand Armada, a force intended to crush the very spirit of humanity, was now a graveyard of twisted metal, a haunting testament to human ingenuity, to the fury unleashed when a species is pushed to the very edge of survival. Earth's long-hidden fleet moved through the wreckage with methodical precision, the grim satisfaction of victory overshadowed by the stark reality of what this conflict truly meant. Aboard his own dreadnought, High Admiral Jensen took a weary breath. It was a breath heavy with relief, but also weighed down by a chilling premonition. He turned away from the viewport, staring back at the cradle of mankind bathed in the harsh light of the sun, its fragile beauty a stark contrast to the devastation surrounding them. "Notify Earth," he ordered, his gravelly voice filled with exhaustion. "Message is simple. As always. Threat neutralized. Commencing full salvage operations. Expect our return when complete. And prepare for the next wave. This, sadly, is just the beginning." He glanced at a screen showing human vessels recovering escape pods, providing the barest courtesy to the broken enemy, a mercy the Krellians had never extended when they held the reins of power. It gave him a grim kind of satisfaction, to show them a compassion they never offered, and yet he was under no illusions. These pathetic survivors would crawl back to their Emperor, and the tale they would tell would send tremors throughout the galaxy. Humans, however, wanted the Emperor to know fear. Humans were not anyone's subjects, and any further transgression will be met with not a primitive response, but of one that would challenge an empire and bring it to its knees. "No time for pleasantries," he continued, his voice returning to its steely edge. "Compile a full report, every engagement, Krellian weapons analysis, ship designs, everything. Just because we beat the fleet that came for us doesn't mean there isn't another on its way. And this time, they won't make the same mistakes." Jensen knew that today was not an ending, but the opening act of a new era. The Emperor's proclamation would still ring out through the stars, a death knell promising annihilation. But now, the galaxy would soon learn just how deadly the human flame could be when cornered, its brilliance fueled by decades of deception and a determination born from the threat of extinction. This is no longer a hidden war. His crew, the thousands of men and women under his command, shared none of their commander's grim contemplation. Around him, cheers began to erupt, growing louder by the second. He didn't try to silence them. They had earned this moment of exultation, a well-deserved respite after a battle fought and won against impossible odds. Jensen would ensure they were well compensated, for they were now seasoned veterans, a hardened spear tip of humanity's true might, the only ones who could truly claim to know the enemy's capabilities, and the enemy's vengeful wrath that would soon follow. He watched his crew and realized they were also the only humans who fully understood the trials still to come. The galaxy remained unaware of Earth's strength, but word would travel fast, carried on the terror of Krellian survivors, amplified by the enraged bellows of the humiliated Emperor. The other starfaring races, the ones cowering under the Krellian boot, would soon look upon humanity with a mixture of awe and fear. And those who dared to see this change as an opening, a weakness upon which to prey, they would learn the same harsh lesson the Krellian Star Empire had just paid for in blood, a lesson that would reverberate across the stars. Underestimate humanity, at your peril. The news arrived on Earth like a thunderclap rippling across a calm sea. Jensen's stark message, cryptic but clear in its implications, sent waves of shock and disbelief radiating outwards. The years of deception, of strained resources and covert shipbuilding, that seemed like the only gamble, the last desperate play of a species facing extinction. Yet, to see it succeed so completely, to realize humanity now held the upper hand, was overwhelming. The global response was a maelstrom. Relief was the initial wave, tinged with survivor's guilt and the echoes of lives lost under the Krellian protection before the masquerade had begun. This quickly hardened into determination. Nations that had bickered for centuries suddenly found common ground. Survival was the only mandate now, and Earth could no longer afford internal squabbles. Research facilities hummed into overdrive. Scientists previously held back by limited funding now worked around the clock, analyzing every scrap of captured Krellian technology. The information Jensen's fleet provided, the tactical data, the vulnerabilities and strengths of Krellian ships fueled a frenzy of innovation. Planetary defenses, once flimsy, now sprouted into monstrous constructs. Orbital cannons, shield generators, anything feasible to protect the once vulnerable haven. Meanwhile, shipyards churned, Earth's hidden fleet growing daily, not just with new vessels, but with upgraded designs, weapons adapted from Krellian principles. Whilst Earth's fleet was the pinnacle of human design, there were still things they could splice from the Krellian wreckage, always adapting and always overcoming. Each day, humanity grew more formidable. Amidst this transformation, Jensen became a symbol, the weathered admiral whose stern visage now graced news feeds from Tokyo to Buenos Aires. He was the architect of their survival. To some, he was a hero, a savior. Others, more wary, saw him as the face of an era where war might become humanity's eternal state. Regardless, he had shouldered a weight unimaginable to any human in prior history. In the quiet moments after relentless press conferences and strategic summits, Jensen would often stare up at the stars. The beauty that had once filled him with wonder now ignited apprehension. Every star was a potential birthplace of another empire, another Krellian threat. Yet within him, defiance bloomed alongside the worry. Earth would not only survive, it would thrive. Humanity, once on the brink of annihilation, was no longer a hidden threat. They were a roaring fire, ready to burn away any shadow that dared descend upon them again. Earth turned into a fortress, not only brimming with weapons but alive with fierce resolve and a new sense of unity forged in the crucible of shared peril. Its hidden fleet patrolled the edges of the solar system, a vigilant shield against any reprisal from the Krellian Star Empire. Yet the expected retaliation never came. Only chilling silence echoed across the cosmos. Jensen, promoted from admiral to a role with uncomfortably grandiose titles like Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces, wrestled with the unknown. The lack of an immediate Krellian counteroffensive was unsettling. Were they crushed utterly, or merely biding their time, licking their wounds and planning a more devastating reprisal? Were they now too afraid to face humanity, perhaps even doubting the Emperor's promises of an easy victory? Despite the unanswered questions, life on Earth continued, though now irrevocably transformed. The militarized society, the focus on technological development, had seeped into everyday existence. From children's toys modeled after warships to mandatory survival courses added to school curricula. The shadow of a conflict unseen by most, yet ever present in the hearts and minds of their leaders lingered. Meanwhile, whispers from the outer edges of monitored space brought fragmented tales. Messengers from other subjugated races spoke of rebellion and chaos within the Krellian Star Empire. It seemed the shock of defeat at the hands of primitives had shattered their facade of invincibility. Dissent, once ruthlessly suppressed, now flared brightly throughout their conquered territories. On Earth, these whispers ignited both hope and cold calculation. Some saw this as an opportunity to forge alliances, to create a united front against an oppressive empire. Others, Jensen among them, saw only increased danger. If the Krellian Star Empire crumbled, the galaxy would fracture into warring factions, hungry vultures squabbling for the spoils. Earth might have a chance to avoid direct conflict, but the fallout would be unpredictable and potentially just as lethal. It was a time of uneasy anticipation. Jensen, the architect of Earth's salvation, found himself facing an even greater challenge. He battled not just against tangible threats, but the creeping paranoia of the unknown. Yet with grim determination, he continued to shape the defenses, continued to study Krellian technology. His gaze remained fixed on the stars, for he knew that whether the next great threat emerged from a revitalized Krellian empire, a fractured galaxy, or from some unknown corner of the universe, he would be ready. Humanity would be ready.